Nothing that I'm about to say should just be glossed over because it has all intention purposes for existence. And it's going to be crude. So before that, in a little preamble, it's that, oh, I know that females are the progenitors of life. They're, like without them, it's game over. So of course that they're great. However, that being said, there's garbage babies. I found out this thing. Just this whole thing where there's them and look. Oh man. And this is a conversation I was having with myself the other day that I'd like to capitalize off, if I will, in the amount of flicker rate. And this flicker rate is something that subliminally is something that if you have enough discord, it's going to make you think of things. And so this is kind of interesting, is that because your chemical, when it's being released, there's certain things that release that is undeniable that is being released. And it's kind of the same way in birthing, but in a different complex entirely. But in the system of anything, there's always preambles. And so when there's like this thing, you send a shockwave to a mouse's brain and it twitches its leg. Is it twitching its leg because you sent the shockwave, or is that just the closest nerve it struck? It's these things. When a praying mantis's head gets cut off, it can still fornicate. That's a little bit more complex and is being attributed the same way through death. The wages of sin are death, and so that should be an elephant in the room in any system. And so back to flicker rate. If there's like these flicker rates, and all it comes down to is just getting enough things inside to clog up to make it turn over. That's how I see it. Is like if your clothing is really tightly sewn, it's going to make for a better wind protector, because your body heat is just going to clog up inside of it and rotate, and so it'll seem warmer intrinsically. But when flicker rate, it's with the same thing, it's just done with like these flashes, and so like everything is seen in flashes because light's bouncing off everything. Granted, I'm at the point in thinking where, and this is true because there's so much of it, space junk around the Earth is flying around, orbiting. It's going thousands of miles per hour, so it's essentially all these bullets that are in non-stop rotation around the planet because we have satellites and no one has oversight with them. That's not a pun. It's real. And so when these things are like orbiting, they're picking up so much momentum that they start making this electromagnetic field around them. Catch-22, the Earth already has one, but when there's so many of these little ones, they all culminate because like minds think together. I'm not saying that cells are alive. We don't know if they're conscious. That's the other big thing, is that when they start collecting as a consciousness, the hive mind picks up. And is this a thing of flicker rate? You bet your buttons it is. Even if it isn't, you can't deny. And so then there's like this influx of solar radiation from the sun coming in, that of which hits my eyes really hard and it stings. Because our sun's whiter than it ever has been, I think is because there's chemicals getting sprayed in the air. Excuse me, RIP, this person in South that got a plane sprayed above their house and then died a few weeks later. No, but these flicker rates with the magnetics of these like small things that keep getting popped up, space trash, that's in synchronicity of the Earth's magnetosphere. And so these two things are like culminating. I think they're making all these stop gaps in between. And when solar radiation's coming through, and it has come through so naturally, and then now it's got all these like haywire things in the mix, it's going to try and scrub them. And so when that happens, there's a flicker rate, and anything that is like in a pattern that's disjunct versus a pattern that's a junction is definitely going to be like a flicker rate, and that's how Morse code's made. And on the other end, when we look at people and their genes, I think that in the same rate as flicker rate, you with your eyes look at people and their makeup of their body, not the makeup on their body. That's what's used in covering up the actual makeup, the genealogy. And I think that, like, even though we can't see genes, that you're reading them whenever you see people and they're doing their facial expressions. I think it's like their instincts or their ancestral. And so when you're doing this, it's a second course of not EM flicker rate, electromagnetic, but more of the machinery with the genealogy. And so in doing these two things, it's like you can make pictures, pictorials of the quantum electrodynamics. Is like this closest thing to defining reality that we have, by a guy who died named Richard Feynman, and it's just squiggles and it's describing how light interacts. So you can piggyback that with the flicker rate from the space trash. And then with the, of course, if you take in chemistry, there's drawings of molecules. So doubling that with what I was just inferring in genealogies occurring, putting those two drawings together, and now we've got something to work with. Because we're conditioned to think that everything is pre-programmed when it's not. But what happens when the deprogramming accelerates? We're always trying to find like the fine links of I don't know, things that are not even set right. An old $5 bill getting spit out of the cash register's self-checkout so quickly as if it's not even thinking of it. That's a sure sign to not try that again. Or things that are locked when you're programmed to think like, or if I just keep plugging at the internet and rebooting stuff, it's going to eventually work. And you're attributing that importance to, like, if something's blocking you out, like an IRS site, and it says that you've got a wrong password, if by entering in you think you're in a timeout and it's going to come back, you'd be sadly mistaken. Okay, so that being said, it's going to be loud crunchings. And that being said is where the most outlandish thing is that, like, if you had birthed a clone, and that can't be real because if it's coming out of you, there's no way it was fiddled with a side. However, if there's things that are more than half of what you are, and they came from an outside source and they're regenerating, you have now become the identity of that thing. So if you have an earth and it's terraformed in the water, the food, the electromagnetic radiation all around, and it's making everything so horrendous, and it's cancer through the roof. And cancer is like when your cells, they start thinking on their own and doing what they want until they take over the body and they don't know that they're killing the host. And so it's just these two things. It's like if you have every ailment known to man, and then there's no chance on Earth because Earth isn't recognizable, you may as well say that there's like this entire multiverse. We don't know too much about it except we're it. That would be the greatest thing that's conflated about the land, and that would be the most horrendous thing conflated about a person, is that if they were birthing a clone, and if it actually were a clone, because of the conditions, it was more half of something that wasn't it. You look at square in its face, it's a clone, and not even know it. And so that's when there comes a part where, like, your gene and your parents' genes, they're half and half. That's a spectrum. 1, 2, bifurcate. So one. Hi, okay, so in birthing a clone, I was just thinking, what does that even mean? It's like a person that's born has half the genes from one parent and the other genes from the other parent. But if it's a clone, it would mean that you just have the person birthing it, the female, it would be birthing a clone of itself. So an entire gene of just its own would be a clone of it. And then the only thing that I thought was close to this is Mary, the Virgin Mary birthing Jesus. Uh, it wasn't a clone of her, even though it only had one subset of human gene. Um, it said that it was conceded by the Holy Spirit, and so that is the only thing that would even be close to fitting this.